16, an accessible city St Asaph Street proposed road layout options. Yes, please.
Okay, so just as a brief history here, on the 30th of October, the ITI committee heard the views of about 37 people who gave up their time to present us their feedback on the current situation in St Asaph Street. And this arose because after the new design to the street was implemented, noting too that this design had been fully consulted on, and I may add was compromised from the Streets and Spaces Design Guideline recommendations. But after that was implemented, there was dissatisfaction and concern expressed by a group of local business and property owners. So in sympathy with them and recognising their concerns, we put the call out for people to come and talk to us or write to us with their views. So it was not a consultation per se, but we invited feedback. We actually had 320 responses, and a majority of those by far, up to 265, actually supported the staff recommendation to the committee as option 1 with some added safety implementation features. Concurrently, Council commissioned a post-construction safety audit since safety was one of the main criticisms from the business group. So after listening to the respondents, the ITI committee reconvened to make this recommendation to full council today, and you can see the recommendations up there. And the committee has recommended option 1 plus some additions. In addition, one of the additions is including to request consultation on a 30 kilometres speed zone in there, which came through loud and clear from the many voices that talked to us. We might got a note too that staff had many meetings. I think I've heard it's about 16 meetings with the business group, and spent many hours investigating their ideas and views. The ITI committee spent, I think it was 5 hours, listening to the views of a broader spectrum of interested residents. And I'd like to add that after lengthy deliberations, including the 5-hour feedback hearing and the 320 submissions, the committee reached a unanimous decision, which is before you today. And short of starting the whole project again, we feel that option 1 is the prudent, fiscally responsible and most appropriate action to support. If we were to go back to square one to redesign, we'd have to reconsult. I personally believe there would be a huge pressure to remove all the parking from the south side, and we got that loud and clear from the feedback. And that was also the preferred original option, which was from the Streets and Spaces Design Guidelines. So I reiterate that St Asaph Street today represents a compromised design to accommodate those who are not ready to surrender all the parking. Our staff will implement recommendations from the safety audit as part of option 1, and St Asaph Street is also currently deemed safe from the safety audits that we have received. Option 1 will add improvements to the current street, but there is still more work to do to enhance the amenity further, among which is tree planting to give verticality, which will also slow down the speed. So once again, the ITI committee was unanimous in recommending option 1. And I'd like to invite Mike Davidson to add any comments since he chaired this meeting.
I'll do that, thank you.
I'd like to invite you to invite Councillor Davidson, I'm sorry.
No, Pauline said enough.
I've never said enough. Right.
You've got nothing to add? Right, okay, good, thank you. All right, so do we have any questions for staff? Yanni?
Can you just help me just confirm in terms of the emergency services vehicles? Can you just confirm that we've got confirmation from the fire service that any safety issues or aspects is being sorted with this corridor?
Yeah, so we've worked with the main 3 emergency services. The fire service still have some issues around, mainly if there's an event on St Asaph Street itself and they have to stop, and there are some issues with safety of their staff when they're taking equipment from the appliance as they service a particular site. They haven't been as concerned around the movement down the corridor during an emergency, but it's more around safety of their staff while they're attending to a fire. So we're still working with them on how they can manage that. But we've got a good working relationship with the fire service, and we're talking to them regularly. We don't think that it's something that we can't work through with them.
Right. Have they put those concerns in writing to us?
Only in emails between myself and the fire service.
Right. Okay.
Dion?
I mean, there was, at the meeting or at the hearings or whatever it was, there was a lot of support for taking the parking off the southern side, but substituting the parking that was on the southern side for off-street sites, and there were a number that were identified that were either owned by the Crown or the council that could be used for that purpose, even as a trial. Have you investigated that, or those options?
Yep. So we're currently working with the property team to look at the available land along St Asaph Street and nearby. And we're constantly monitoring the occupancy as well, because with Litchfield Street opening up, that's also added another 800 car parks within a couple of blocks of St Asaph Street. That's having an impact. But yeah, we are still working on the possibility of getting some other off-street parking nearby while the city adjusts.
And I mean, has there also been any thought to, and in that same breath, there was also the suggestion around maybe temporarily, whatever that word is, temporarily taking off some of the parking on the southern side, like just painting some lines or something like that, and then offsetting that with off-street car parking. Has that been looked into?
Not at this stage.
And just on that, the work that you said you're doing, looking at the sites, why have we not possibly put that as a recommendation today, or had that as an option or something?
I think we were asked to go away and look at what the possibilities were, so we probably couldn't give anything very much in terms of something that was conclusive or that was a real possibility. We have had a number of sites that we've looked at, but they just haven't been available to us. So I think there's a bit more work that we need to do first before we could actually perhaps propose something to you that we know we could make happen.
Right, and the other
But
thing
you'll continue to review this street and others in terms of an accessible city.
So can I ask one more question?
Yep.
So something that was brought to my attention just earlier this week actually was the power lines along the northern side. They obviously are getting towards the end of their life, from the person that told me that they were getting there. Has there been any discussion from the work that, the future work potentially, about what that would mean if you needed to underground those power lines, and what that would mean for the traffic on that street, or say the corridor?
Yeah, I don't think it'll have an effect on traffic flows. It is a consideration for the future. How it will actually affect the use of the street, I don't think it's going to have much of an impact on it. To underground those overhead cables, you're looking at something in the order of $1 million. The area that they'd need to go in is very, very full of services, water, stormwater, all along that northern side of the footpath there. So it's not an easy job to do.
Anne?
Question. Just you, hi. You alluded to the fact that the opening of the Litchfield Street parking building has had an impact.
Yeah.
What have you noticed, and what have you heard back?
So it's only been open for a couple of weeks, so we're still monitoring the effects of on-street parking, but anecdotally the staff in our parking enforcement team are telling us that they've noticed a reduction in the amount of cars parked on the street, but we haven't actually measured it.
That's good news.
Phil?
At the committee, I guess we had some discussion around the impact of if the business people's their option, if we were adopting that, and especially in relation to another 53 car parks. And I'm just wondering, could you just remind us of the impact of that, especially say regarding design and safety, if in fact that option had been agreed with by the committee?
Yeah. So when the business group's option was put to us, we had that independently safety audited, and one of the things that came out of that safety audit were concerns around sight lines for cyclists when you add vehicles in between a cycleway and a road lane, a traffic lane, you cut down on the visibility of motorists who wish to make a left-hand turn into one of the driveways along, then they'd have to cross the separated cycleway. It cuts down on the cyclist visibility of the motorist turning and also the motorist visibility of the cyclist. So that was quite a serious concern raised by the safety auditors, and that also came through quite strongly in the feedback that we received from various members of the public.
Glenn?
Since the report was written, Aaron, I imagine the situation around the Metro sports facilities become more fluid. So that's noted as a factor on page 280, with the planned vehicle movements. Have you got some sense of how that might alter the dynamic now?
Well, I think there's a lot of uncertainty around that, and until we know what might happen at that end of St Asaph Street, we can't really say too much about it. But I think that area is one impact in isolation as well. But you have to look at the whole area, the development of the south frame laneways, and you've got ARA at the other end, and the School of Discovery. So the Metro Sports is one consideration, or that site, or whatever happens with in the future. But there's a whole lot of other activities that'll impact how St Asaph Street functions.
I have a question on number 2, which says request staff to undertake public consultation on reducing the speed limit along St Asaph Street to 30 km/h. I seem to recall that when the government passed the bylaw that created the anomaly on St Asaph Street, but created the 30 km zone inside the St Asaph Street and that block, the Central City block, that they inadvertently changed the speed limits on the Cashel Mall and through another place that has a lower speed limit than the 30 km. Do you need to consult on reducing that? And if that's the case, could we include it in here and just wrap it all up in one foul swoop?
I don't think we can include the reduction from 50 km to 30 km in this report. I do believe that we have to go out and...
No, it says request staff to undertake public consultation. What I'm asking is, do we need to do public consultation to reduce the speed back to 15 km on the Cashel Mall?
Okay.
We can look at that.
Yeah.
I think there's a wider piece of work about the changes that were brought into the traffic and parking bylaw via the SUR Act, and we need to look at where that's all sitting at the moment. So we're doing that now. But we can do that consultation.
If there's a public consultation, it seems to me to hang a few additional elements on it together. Might speed things up when you're trying to slow things down. Just saying. Sorry, did somebody here have a question, Raph?
Yeah, I guess for those of us not involved in the committee stuff, how does this answer the issues around the road narrowness and issues around when people are parking, getting out of the car? Because it doesn't seem like that's changed that much.
Yeah, so the reduction in speed, the potential reduction in speed limit will have an effect on that, as will some of the other traffic calming effects like planting out the tree pits. I guess the ultimate would perhaps be taking out all of that parking on the south side to give you more width. It is a width issue. Neither of the options in that report really gains additional width. People just need to be careful getting out of their cars. You've got to look and wait until it's clear before you open your door.
Yeah.
The safety orders haven't noted that as a particularly concerning point in the design, and haven't said that that's something that we need to rush ahead and make improvements on.
All right, so Pauline, you'd like to move that? Mike, you'd like to second it? No? Oh, sorry. Sarah would like to second it. Is there any discussion? Dion? Sorry, Jamie.
Well, I plan on voting against it and foreshadowing the motion, so I'm not sure if maybe someone who's moved it and wants to speak in favour of it first.
Do you want to tell us what the motion is?
My foreshadowed motion would just simply be to remove option 2.
To what?
My foreshadowed motion would be, instead of moving or option 1, as stated in the report, that I'd just move option 2 as a foreshadowed motion. I don't think that there will be majority support for that, so I don't want to take up too much time. I'm happy to speak to why I'll be voting against the recommendations there, but the foreshadowed motion would be that if it were to fail, I'd move option 2.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right, so Sarah.
It was really interesting listening to the verbal feedback that we had in that really long session after recess, and it was really clear that for many members of the community the current design doesn't work, although for the most part they wanted option 1. The road corridor itself is narrow for cars. It's all within the guidelines, but it feels narrow, and passengers aren't used to getting out into traffic. They're used to getting out onto a footpath, and so that causes some concerns. For cyclists, the cycleway is a little bit narrow for overtaking sometimes, and the way to solve that, it was put forward to the committee really strongly by many members of the community, was to remove the parking on the south side. That would enable for all of those things to be altered. However, I'm in favour of evidence-based decision making, and there is no clear evidence that we have at the moment from the safety report that we need to make those changes. And in times of financial stress, when we have lots of other things on our plate, when this layout has only been in for a year, I think we need to let it bed in. I think that with more changes on the street in the offing, that seeing this through for now, adding the safety improvements that we've encouraged through the resolutions will make a big difference. 30 kilometres an hour, if that goes through, will make a big difference. And I can see in the future that we will need to make a change again, but I don't think that that time is now. We will need to remove the parking on the south side, widen the cycle lanes to account for the extra cyclists coming up through the major cycle routes that are yet to be installed in that area, and potentially widen the lanes for the cars as well. Option 2, adding additional parking, would definitely make it less safe for cyclists, and we know that there's schools going in the area. The near misses that people email me about are ones where there's a parked car and the visibility is missing. So one of the safety things that we'd like them to look at is the potential to remove 1 or 2 car parks where the setbacks aren't enough. Adding additional parking is not evidence-based. Currently there's only 75% occupancy of those car parks, and we've just heard that that's likely to be lowered at the moment, and so spending an additional $1 million of ratepayers' money putting in car parks that aren't even needed is a complete waste. So I'll be voting for option 1.
Mike and Dion.
Thank you. I didn't second this option because I'm actually going to talk against it, and I also want to, I guess, get in line and signal my intention to foreshadow a motion if this one does fail and then Jamie's does, which will be to remove all parking, or consult to remove all parking on the south side of the street. Well, I guess what we do know about the street is it doesn't work. It was initially a compromised design that went out for consultation that was compromised even further. And as a result of that, we hear all this talk about these near misses, but we also see evidence actually of not near misses but actual accidents where vehicles are actually hitting cyclists, where wing mirrors are getting clipped. The road corridor, it does not work for anyone down there. It is too narrow. And the solution to fix that is to remove the car parking on the south side. The lanes don't actually need to be bigger, but there needs to be a buffer zone between the car lanes and where the cars park. And that can be done pretty simply by removing the cars' parks. I know this was based on actually trying to install more car parks, but if we have a look at the data that we've been showing, actually there's a staggering amount of off-street car parking in the very close vicinity of St Aston Street, and that does not even include the brand new car parking building that houses over 800 cars. It is not acceptable, I think, if you're a cyclist, to be biking down there and actually have the risk of being run over by a car because they cannot see you because the visibility is not clear. We heard from many, many people who are concerned with this issue, and it's time for us actually to do what is right. We didn't get it right the first time. It's not a reason to now not make it right. So I will not be supporting this, and hopefully other people will not support this. We can actually get something in place that is right and will future-proof this area.
So I will follow on from what Mike has said and actually agree with what he said, but which is a polar opposite to where I probably started actually on this debate. And the reason that I actually initially supported putting, you know, more car parks back in there and whatnot, but it actually, this street does not work for anybody, as Mike just said. The safety element, the safety review that we had done was from a technical point of view, but actually looking at it from a practicality and a user point of view, people aren't perfect. So if everybody was perfect and autonomous vehicles were here, maybe it would be right. But actually, when you put imperfect people there, you have cars that are different sizes, you have buses, which is, this street is the main transport corridor that links up the eastern suburbs of Christchurch. That's the reality, that's how it's designed, so you can't, you know, the rest of the city would need to be changed in terms of its priority routes to actually push people down Morehouse Ave, which is what people have tried to do. But I'm really concerned about the safety on the street, really, really concerned. I live just on St Asaph Street at the other end near Fitzgerald Ave, and I drive down and walk down, and every single day I see people nearly have an accident, driving up the curbs, hitting those big build-outs on the right-hand side. They are awful. The options that we have in front of us today don't actually really address that. They minorly address it, but they don't actually take the step change that this street needs. This is a street that's heavily used by people in our city, and it doesn't work for anybody. It doesn't work for cyclists. It's not working for cars. It's not working for many of the businesses who need loading zones down there. So I do think that we need to take all the parking off the south side. But I won't be supporting taking all the parking off the south side unless we look at the options of actually substituting those parks. And I think in the future we need to, if we're taking parking away from the streets, we need to look at substituting to off-street parking. And that was the whole point of the Accessible City Plan, that actually says that in the parking chapter. Take on-street car parks away and substitute it for off-street. That was the whole purpose of it. But we actually haven't done that, and we haven't done it on St Asaph Street, and we haven't done it on many other streets as well. So that's why we're having these problems. The cycle lane should have actually been in the south frame. Now, if we actually did that, we wouldn't have all this problem. And don't roll your eyes at me, please. But it's the reality. We should. Oh, you agree? It should have been, and that was the original plan. But why was it not done? You know, we're actually facing the problems of what was done by the government, and we're really facing it. And I think people need to realise that that was the plan, and now we've got something that actually is a substitute, and we've substituted on that, and it's just not working. So I really want to take a big change here. There's $1.1 million actually that's a spare budget from the Hereford Street that we could put towards this. It was come in under budget. There's $1.1 million that's just floating around, but they want to use it for other stuff. We need to fix this street, and I really don't want to just do these minor changes. So I won't be voting for it.
Yanni?
Yeah, thank you. I think we need to really take a step back and look at the big picture, and that is that, you know, there has been no common, I think, agreement around a common vision for the city. What we know is that when the blueprint was announced, the south frame was supposed to be the cycleway connecting the west-east, east-west link from Hagley Park to the Polytech and to those eastern suburbs. And you know, there's a great map on the press website that shows what was promised in the blueprint and what we actually got. So what we got was a series of laneways that doesn't provide a nice, beautiful green corridor, as was indicated in the blueprint. And that's led to, I think, the points that have been raised today, is that we end up with streets that aren't good for anyone. We've got Chewham Street and St Asaph Street carrying all sorts of traffic, heavy vehicles, buses, pedestrians, cyclists, motorists, and it's just not working. And, you know, it frustrates me that we are basically picking up the cost of part of the blueprint that was not done. And, you know, we should be looking for, I think, a much better solution if we're concerned about safety. And so I totally endorse the comments that have been made. I raised these concerns at the time that these designs were coming through council, that if you look, for example, up in Auckland, in Wellington and Lambton Quay, and you can see what happens when you over-design streets to try and accommodate different things, then sometimes you end up with a more dangerous situation. And I believe that's what we've got in St Asaph Street at the moment. I won't support minor tweaks to improve it. What we actually need to do is have a good relook at the Central City blueprint and the Central City inaccessible plan, because at the moment it's not working for a wide range of people, and it's time that we took a big picture look to see how we can actually change it to get much better outcomes than what we're getting.
Jamie?
Thanks. Look, I'm voting against the recommendations there because fundamentally I support option 2. I would be prepared, just in light of what Mike said in debate, to incorporate consulting on the removal of the parking on the south side to widen the streets. So, like I said, I'll be voting against the recommendations up there in favour of option 2, but would have a caveat that I'd be very happy to consult on the removal of the parking of the south parking, because I think that fundamentally addresses the issue with it. This is the accessible city plan, and I think we all sort of snigger about this because it is, as Yanni alluded to, it's the most ironically titled document you've ever heard of. So dark humour aside, St Asaph Street is completely inaccessible, and why it's inaccessible, contrary to what an independent audit has actually told us, that's all well and good that that has come back and said that it's not broken, but with most objective view possible, just drive down it. It feels fundamentally stuffed. It's incredibly dangerous. In my view, I'm a fearless 32-year-old driver, and I feel like a 92-year-old driving down there because you almost refuse to drive in parallel to another car. You're petrified that a bus might come down at the same time as you and someone might open a door. So I don't need an audit to tell me that it doesn't work because I have eyes and I've driven down there. I don't think that the option presented in front of us fixes that. It doesn't fix the narrowness, which is the real issue with it. I think that there's an unfair assertion that often gets brought up where it sounds like it's an us versus them mentality. It sounds like the Central City Business Group is the wicked businesses trying to ram their views down the rest of our throats, and I don't think that's the case because ultimately the business community is the community. Businesses exist because they provide what the general population need and want and what they demand. It's the fundamentals of of the way that the Western world works. So yes, I believe that it's important to plan for the future. I think that it's absolutely essential that we plan for the future, but you can't do that at the expense of today. And I think that option 2 that the Central City Business Group has put forward doesn't necessarily remove the ability to plan for the future, but it does accept the fact that businesses still need to be able to function today. And I genuinely fear that if things remain the same, or even option 1 as presented in the recommendations in front of us, go ahead, there's a good chance that those businesses won't exist in the future, so we can take our futuristic transport all we like, but you'd be taking a bus or autonomous vehicle to nowhere because I just can't see those businesses existing long term. So talking about meeting the needs of today, the fact of the matter is 80% of people travel by car in Christchurch. So if you make it inaccessible, you've got 80% of people that are having a design scheme given to them which just doesn't suit their needs. Option 2 I don't see is necessarily car versus bike. I think that that's also an argument that's been articulated, and I think that that's unfair because no one's questioning the merits of bike transport, and no one's suggesting that the cycle lanes go. Option 1 is cheaper. Yes, I accept that, but I'd also argue that $1 spent on something that doesn't fix a problem is $1 wasted. So if you've got just over $1 million spent on a solution that will fix a very real problem, then I think that that's $1 million incredibly well spent. And as Dion argued, and quite correctly so, there are unders and overs throughout the Accessible City project, and East Hereford Street is a prime example of that. You've got $1 million under budget that's floating around, and you've got an option that can be remedied for just over $1 million. So the funding is sitting right there. So I most certainly favour option 2. I'll be voting against option 1, and would quite happily, should this fail, would incorporate Mike's suggestion of consulting on the removal of the car parks on the south side, because I think that addresses the fundamental issue, which is the fact that it's too bloody narrow.
Yeah, Phil and then Vicky. Red.
So, look, I'm certainly going to support the recommendations as they're there. It's not too often we hear Councillor Johansson and Councillor Goff kind of like having a similar argument in terms of almost agreeing with each other, and with kind of like contradictory outcomes. I think it was quite clear when we listened to the staff just before that if we adopt option 2 with an additional 53 car parks, there's major safety concerns. So it is just wrong to actually proceed with something. We get very clear safety advice that we shouldn't do it, and we shouldn't really even be considering that. I think in terms of the businesses, there were 20 businesses who were involved with that. The other businesses actually did not join them. I think overall, a lot of businesses just want us as a council to get along and do it. And this is part of Accessible City. We need to get an Accessible City finished. The concept that it's inaccessible basically is not true. I think most of us go down St Asaph at some stage. Okay, it's quite there's been a learning curve for everybody, and the staff are making some quite significant changes really by way of changing the tree pit designs, and also having additional parking bays for delivery trucks, and that kind of accessibility. The future steps, for example, of including 30k per hour will make this very, very workable. So I see the recommendations that are up there today as a major step towards sorting this. If we find that in fact it is seen to be too unsafe, and that there's a need to remove the parking on the south side, I'm sure as a council we could sensibly consider that. But I think we have to go with, in fact, what businesses have told us. This is kind of a compromise. Some changes are being made, but I think we have to be very careful that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I think also that the idea of looking back to the south frame, actually that's with hindsight. These other laneways are in now. That is too late. It would have been ideal, and we didn't have a say then, but we have a say now, and I urge councillors to vote sensibly.
Now, Vicky,
I would be happy to take to support Mike's amendment. I wouldn't be happy to support Jamie's. But it came through very clearly that putting those extra car parks jeopardised the cyclist's safety totally. Like, the difficulty that you have is that they're not visible, so there are very many near misses as they go down there. So to put more car parks and decrease the visibility of cyclists is actually incredibly dangerous. And I think there was a lot of recognition of that in the submissions. Alistair Humphrey spoke at the submissions. He spoke incredibly powerfully about that being a major route for the hospital staff and the risks that they take and what happens when any of them are hurt, and the number of operations that need to be rescheduled, and all of those flow-on effects from that. Yes, it definitely needs to be 30 k's an hour. We did that wrong. I wanted it 30 k's earlier. It should have been 30 k's. It can only operate at 30 k's. Already the speed limit down there is 37 k's in terms of the actual speed that people travel at. And if you're putting a school down there with 700 kids, yes, it absolutely has to be 30 k's. And the idea that 8, 9, 14, 15, 16-year-old kids are going to bike down there and we haven't made that area safe enough scares me. I think our responsibility is for safety. I agree with Jamie that the feel of the road is that it's insufficiently wide. And I would happily remove the car parks in order to get a better flow of cars, because actually the conflict for cars is between travelling down the road and parking on the road. So those who are parking are actually impeding the flow of cars. It's not the cyclists who impede the flow of cars. So we looked at the possibility, and Aaron and others are looking, or the property unit's looking at the possibility of using the Lynn's owned car park near Ecan, so that there was parking nearby. Yes, there is a huge amount of parking around, but there is still a tradition that people want to park very near the shops that they're going into, and also for disabled car parking. So we wanted to look at that, but this design was a compromise on what was originally recommended. So the car parks were added as a compromise at the time, and it wasn't what was being recommended. So what we're now doing is compromising on a compromise. The part 5 that says a review of the functionality and safety of the corridor talks about the possibility of going out for a consultation on actually removing the car parks. In effect, that's what it could mean. And that's what I'd be very happy to do. If you want to bring that forward 24 months, I'd be very happy to support that. What I won't be supporting is the proposal that came to add car parks, and as we got told over and over again from cyclists and from everybody else, and in fact from some property owners, that compromised the safety of people using that street. I'm not okay with compromising safety. I am okay if we want to increase the flow of cars along there at 30 k's to reduce the car parking or to eliminate the car parking on the south side. So I would happily support that, but the proposal that came to us in terms of the one that came of the 53 extra car parks was completely unworkable and completely unsafe.
Ref. And
yeah.
then Anne.
I don't know what to say here. I mean, I think, you know, the initial plan has been flawed. I mean, St. Asaph Street used to work perfectly. It was very accessible, very great road. Parking around those shops was easy. And I think the removal of the cycle lane through the south frame was a real problem. We had this conversation with the Litchfield cycle lane when it's on the wrong side of the road. Chewham Street, yeah. And now we've got the school. The cycle lane's on the wrong side of the road for the school. So you're going to have all those kids trying to cross the road. So what we're trying to do is retrofit cycle lanes into roads, which used to work well. And so we're tinkering with this stuff because it's not working properly. So I don't know what the answer is to this, but this option to me seems to be a bit of a tinker. I don't think it's going to solve the issues that we've got. I cycle up and down. Actually, I cycled on that road, on the road. Don't like the cycle lanes, and it's very unsafe. So I don't know what we do about this, but I think at some point we're going to have a conversation about the car parking on the road and look for somewhere else to put car parking, and it might be behind the shops or somewhere close by. Because actually, if you take, I mean, we're talking 50, 100 car parks max. I mean, that's not even one floor of a car parking building. So if we actually look for where can we put those car parks that can serve those shops, if you take that out of the road, then actually we may have something that can work. So in terms of voting on this, you know, I don't have a strong opinion on this either way, but I think we do need to go back and consult on a bigger picture solution for this.
Yeah. And
so we have a situation where we've got this tension between today's needs and tomorrow's needs, and as we saw with Ferry Road, we can find a way through. I believe option 1 is a compromise, but we have to think of a whole community, and I believe that this option provides a win-win. I mean, I was encouraged actually by what you said, Jamie, in terms of the fact that you had to slow down as you went along there because you were worried. I mean, that's got to be a good thing. We're aware of other people. We want the traffic to slow down.
I do drive in the middle, though.
I will be supporting this. I know the huge amount of work that staff have put into trying to make this, to bring this to us today, and I think that we need to respect that. But I think also what Sarah said in terms of embedding and just giving it some time. So I think that answers your question, Raf, in terms of what we do. We just give it some time. We let it, we get it started and we give it time. Thanks.
Yep. Aaron and Pauline's going to wrap up the debate, so is it just Aaron and then Pauline? Is there anyone else? Great, thank you.
Wow, this is all becoming so clear. And I agree with Anne's point that she just finished on, that about leaving it a bit longer to see what happened. There was some of the deputations that was their choice. They weren't either all for removing all the car parks or adding more car parks. There were some people that come in that said, you know what, it's not as bad as people are saying. It needs to be given longer for people to get used to the change. I know in situations overseas where something's dangerous, like in a work zone, which we in this country make 30k an hour, in the States they double the fines because it makes people think more about speeding or breaking the law as far as the road code goes in a work zone, because people can get injured or killed. And maybe there's certain parts of the city, if we felt things were really dangerous, that could be an application for this country as well, given the current road toll. I don't think it's necessarily the physical design of the place that's the problem. I really believe in this part of the city it's the attitude of almost everyone, the drivers, attitudes towards cyclists, cyclist attitudes towards drivers, and pedestrians chucked in the middle. As road users, New Zealanders don't get on well. And that's our biggest problem. We don't respect all the other road users as human beings, as someone's daughter or someone's son, and that's where our biggest change needs to come. I did support this at committee level, and I'll support it again today, mainly because of number 4, and that is that the staff look at the installation of mobility car parking. There's not one disability or mobility car park on the entire of St Asaph Street, which is a clear message to anyone with a disability in this city that you're not welcome in that part of the city. And they aren't. And if we take all the parking off the street and then don't even have any disability car parking either, then that is a clear message. And to expect someone with a disability to walk a couple of blocks from an off-street car park, I think, is unrealistic and, in fact, a form of prejudice. And so I wouldn't support doing that. I will support, especially number 4, that we do look to bring in those disability car parks. I look forward to it being 30k an hour. The median speed's only 37 now, and people like Jamie are forced to slow down. It's pretty obvious, and it won't be hard to do soon because you'll be encouraged to with some fines. And if anyone feels this part of the roading system in Christchurch is really dangerous, let me introduce you to an intersection on here.
Before I call on Pauline, can I just make it clear that we're talking only about when people are sort of talking about substituting other items, that it is just item 1, A, B, C, and D that we're talking about, so that we're good with item 2, 3, 4. And 5, although I'm actually suspecting that there's a bit of an amendment to item 5 that actually might meet some of the concerns that have been raised, and which is why I wanted to kind of interject now, where it says request staff to undertake a review of the functionality and safety of the corridor, including the cycleway, in 24 months. I'm actually wondering whether I'm getting a sense that we would like staff to undertake a further review, but this time focused on the functionality of the corridor in 24 months.
Could you also say width in there as well? Could you also include the word width?
It is the functionality of the road corridor. It's not...
Well, could that be explicit? Because I don't want to hear another independent audit that nothing's broken, so I just wanted to say width, because if I had to pick one word that's broken with it, it's the width of it.
Yeah, the width of the lanes. You know, it's not having any wriggle room around.
So could it just say, I mean,
it does enable a quicker look at the parking on the south side.
So could we just say functionality including width and safety of the corridor?
Well, it's the functionality of the road corridor. So we're not reviewing the cycleway. We're reviewing the width of the functionality, and the functionality of the road corridor, so take out safety, functionality of the road corridor, including the width of the lanes.
It's, yes, specifically width.
The staff had some explanation around why they originally went 36 months, and they also talked to us about the fact that they would be doing ongoing monitoring anyway.
Yeah. I'm just recognising that it's in a balance at the moment, and I don't want to kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater. And there is a sense around the table, I'm hearing, that people would like to look at the functionality of the road corridor and not wait for 24 months. They don't want to wait for 24 months, so including the cycleway. So just including the width of the lane, and then take out the rest. I'm going to let Pauline close the debate. I'm trying not to enter into the debate because, but I'm just trying to see if we can get these clarified so that, yeah, but look.
Yeah. Would you put parking in there as well?
Including the width of the lanes, parking.
Does it? But that's functionality of the road, of the road corridor.
And car parking, yeah. And I mean, I'd like to put the kind of in the provision of car parking, because I mean the point that has been made about it being a replacement for on street with off street, you know, it's the intent.
There's a lot of space behind a lot of the buildings along St Asaph Street. Very happy to.
Yeah.
Especially at night time.
Including the width of the lanes and the provision of car park and the provision of car parking.
Since you're not cycling down them.
And just take out the rest of it, because they're gonna report back to ITI anyway. So.
And that, yeah, good addition. So I'm comfortable with approving 5. I'm still voting option 2.
It may well be that one is lost, but I don't want to lose what the. Yeah. Okay. All right. Sorry, Pauline.
No, that's fine. Yeah, and I do I actually agree with everything that Aaron said today. I think you spoke very well, Aaron. And no, you're welcome. Oh, thank you, Aaron. But yeah, I mean, you can see what we're up against. Even around this table, we've got such diverse views, including whether or not it's working. Some people think it's working okay. And recently I attended the cycling congress that we held here in Christchurch. And look, I was really heartened by the response and comments from the attendees who had cycled St Asaph Street, and lots of them did. They were really positive about it, loved it, and said, but we're getting this right, we're getting our city right. And it's hard for us to see that, I think, because it's not finished. And many comments from the feedback session also said that people actually like St Asaph Street. The treatment that it's had is working. And despite what some people around this table say, you can drive down it. And Jamie, you are getting that message, slow down and drive carefully. That's what it's all about. And as staff alluded to, there's now a lot of off-street parking, including the Litchfield Street building of 800 parks, which was opened on the 10th by the Deputy Mayor. He's got his name on the plaque. And so it's about getting used to that change of how we actually access our city and how we use it. So there are more amenity improvements as well, such as the tree plantings to be implemented. So I hope that the fellow councillors will support the 30k zone, which was requested repeatedly by submitters as well, and supported, I think, by the business group too. And I must reinforce that the AAC is a total project. St Asaph Street is just one part, and the benefits of our new look, new behaviour city will not be fully appreciated until it's finished. And what that's going to require is new behaviour, and I think that's what people are struggling with as well. New behaviours, slowing down our driving, actually enjoying the journey through our central city, and actually parking just a little bit further away, or even taking the bus or walking. So we're designing a city that will operate differently from the old one. It will be a slower, safer, more attractive environment, and an inner core which encourages walking and cycling. And St Asaph Street will link with the south frame by various laneways, and a pedestrian-friendly treatment will facilitate and encourage access to the lanes, and also from the lanes back to the street. I want to take this opportunity to thank the business group too for all the time and effort that they've put into presenting their case, and they did make a fantastic case and a very professional presentation, and to assure them that we believe we have conducted a really fair process. We have had untold meetings, we've put hours and hours into this, and so has staff, and we have listened and considered their views and have included wider users as well in their views. The business group conducted themselves well and engaged with us well, and we thank them for that. There was also many complimentary comments from the feedback, and many who actually support removing all the south side car parks, as I've said before. But the committee is of a view that option 1 is the best way forward for now, as it addresses issues from the safety audit and retains the amenity treatments planned to be introduced. And once the trees are in, they'll add huge benefit. And they also help slow traffic down because they add what they call verticality, which is a psychological effect on slowing down your speed. So that'll be really good for Jamie. And the 24-month review of functionality and safety will be welcome and ensures that we'll be monitoring the area and especially noting the effects of the additional safety measures, including the lower speed zone. And don't forget that the tree pit treatments will also enable easier access into the car park, so you'll also be able to drive in forwards, and part of the criticism was that people found it difficult to reverse back into the parks, and I think that'll help immensely. We've also addressed the problem of people getting stuck in the pits already, so that work's been done. And I also support the comments that various councillors have made. Let's give this time to embed. Let's give people time to adjust their behaviour, time to get used to our new city, and time to start enjoying the journey. So I'll be supporting the recommendations of the ITI Committee.
I'll put item 1 first, A, B, C and D. I'll then put items 2, 3, 4 and 5 and as a block, and then if necessary take any of the foreshadowed motions, which was first Jamie, seconded Mike. Okay? Right. So I'll put option 1 as recommended by the ITI Committee. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. Okay, just put up your hands for no. So that's Davidson, Goff, East, Swiggs and Johansson. So that's carried. And I'll put items 2 to 5. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you.